get started? All right, so I'm just going to do a quick introduction for this series. This will be an ongoing series. The title is, it's through our Funk and Focus program. These types of things are urban artistry inspired, the company we're in. We do a lot of urban dance and dialogue, panels, community building. We have a dedication series that's called the Dedication Series Urban Dance and Dialogue. And we are doing the Funk and Focus Urban Dance and Dialogue series basically as an interactive tool. There's a lot of topics that are just important in general, and things that people are sometimes scared to talk about. Sometimes people don't know enough about it to talk about it. And all of these different topics are involved in our dance community. They're things that we see in our dance community. They're things that you see all over the world. People have these questions all over the world. And even within the States, people debate about these things, and that's okay. But what we want to create with all these different series of topics is dialogue. So that's why we're doing the live series. And basically, at some point, we'll be asking for your guys' input here today with questions and comments about these topics. So today's topic, the first one, is African American traditions, cultural appropriation, and being a guest within a culture. Why is that important to talk about as urban dancers and artists is pretty simple, because it's the thing that nobody's talking about. It's the thing that is happening in the dance scene, and people don't know how to address it or don't know where to start. And it's very important within this culture specifically because we're talking about dances that were all birthed from African American traditional musics and what became African American traditional dances. Right. So what we do is rooted in African American heritage and the different cities in the States and their contribution to music and dance, and how that has been, how that has evolved over the years, and where we're at today with that, and how we recognize that it is an African American traditional dance. Do we recognize that? Does other races being involved in the dance, how does that work? How do you pay respect back to the roots, as well as move forward with including your own culture and your own innovation? So today is a really big topic. It's a huge topic, actually, which will hopefully spawn into a few more concise conversations that we can continue with. So today is kind of going to be a little bit general. The questions might be a little bit all over the place because we made it really big. And as we continue with this series, we'll narrow down the topics, and we'll start to dive specifically really more into specific things. We might have new people on here with us. Sometimes it might just be one of us, but this should be a consistent thing. And yeah. So this is a topic that is definitely important in the urban dance scene. Even people being from outside of the country learning American dances, specifically African American dances, how does that work? Even someone like me who didn't come from an African American neighborhood, learning and living for and because of these dances and making my finances through these dances. How do we wrap our heads around that? How do we unpack that? So today it's just really about unpacking a lot of these different things. And it's okay if we get a little bit all over the place with the questions, but the idea is that we get dialogue created, and then we'll narrow it down from there as we continue these talks. So yeah. That being said, I'll just start by saying this, and then I want to allow you guys to comment, question while I'm talking or afterwards, whatever feels right. So for me, I just like to share my perspective a little bit on these topics and then see what you guys think as well. So these are African American dances, traditional dances, right? These are things that in the States we consider folk. We consider these folk dance. We consider it a part of that lineage of American traditions, right? Specifically African American traditions. That we can't take away. That is our origin story. You know, the origin story of urban dance, of what we know of as hip hop, and these things that have turned into fashion, these things that have turned into large contests and different things, they're rooted in African American traditions. And although different races and different people contributed throughout the years, and we will never take away from that, because that's just as important. To remember an origin story is simply to pay homage, to pay respect, to understand a thing from its beginnings, and to understand the full picture of it, so that we're not just thinking about what is hip hop today, what is popping today, what is cool right now. It's about, where does this come from? What is the lineage? Where's the origin story? And then who contributed and how did that look? And that's totally okay. As far as being a guest within a culture, I just want to share that in the States, we grow up segregated. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say, is like, we're in different neighborhoods, right? And that comes from separate but equal, the history with slavery, all of the legislation, Jim Crow, everything that kept white and black separate. Even today in our neighborhoods, if you look at this thing called the racial dot map, you can just Google that. It shows you where the different races live in America. And within each city, it's still very segregated. And most of the people with money, typically speaking, white and Asian, are more in the suburbs. Black, Latino are more in the cities. And where I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in Northern Virginia, in a town called Ashburn, Virginia. Very suburban, very white American, people, upper middle class, people with money. So that really doesn't make me 100% a part of an African American tradition, because I didn't even grow up in an African American neighborhood. There was no black folks where I grew up. There was like 10 in my high school. That's it. It was all white in my high school, about 10 black, 15, 20 Asian. It was really not diverse. So when I learned about street dance, it was from an outsider perspective. So I have a way that I can kind of relate to people in other countries in that sense, where it's like, I'm coming in from a perspective from the outside and saying, okay, well, how do I learn this thing without disrespecting the culture? And also, how do I add my own contributions, you know? And yeah, so I've kind of had to wrap my head around that, and meeting Rashaad and Junius has really helped with that. And to understand that just the history and the truth of where the dances come from is just the history and the truth. It doesn't take away from anything that I want to contribute. It doesn't mean that I can't have my own innovations within a style. It just means that there's an origin story, and we should talk about that. And where we get into cultural appropriation for me is when we don't recognize those histories. If people are telling us, hey, this exists, these people exist, and we choose to ignore that those people are there and nobody's in service to them, then that's where we're bridging into the idea of culturally appropriating something, because we're appropriating, right? We're using something for ourselves without recognizing that there's more people within a thing, right? It's not just about us. It's about a culture, and it's about a history and a lineage that created and allowed me to have the opportunities that I have today, right? The history in everyone, all the OGs, all the guys in the Bay that aren't getting a lot of recognition, and that goes for different people in different cities and states. There's all kinds of people not fully recognized that had major contributions. And if I'm not aware of those people, I'm not trying to be, and I'm not trying to be in service to some of them, or in some way build with some of these people, then we start to bridge towards cultural appropriation, where it's more about me than it is about a community or a culture or recognizing the roots. So I think for cultural appropriation, when you don't recognize that, when someone tells you there's more to a thing and you choose to ignore it, for me, that's cultural appropriation. And if you continue to ignore it, then it's kind of just really rude when you know, because some people, you can tell them a million times, like, hey, this is connected to these things, so we should recognize that. Maybe you should learn a little bit more about this. There's a history to that. There's people this comes from, you know. When you continually choose not to recognize that and you're just gaining from a thing, then that's just fucked up. You know, it's just wrong. It's just really, really bad. We don't want to do that. Yeah. So that's a part of my spiel on it. I'm interested.
Can I build on that?
Yeah, sure.
So clearly, him and me we come from opposite spectrums. Him dealing with white America, the suburbs of white America, and me, I'm from the inner city. I'm from New York. I grew up in the projects, you know, and just as his neighborhood, my neighborhood also didn't have many other ethnicities. There were Dominicans, there were Puerto Ricans, and then there were people who are like of African descent, be it you want to call them Black or African American or any of these things. So we come from these segregated neighborhoods, but the dance is the thing that kind of brought us together. But it was already the commodified dance, the part of the dance that was already being sold, because it was kind of already out of the community already and being brought around the world. So this is where me and him connect, is through what is already culturally appropriated, which is kind of interesting. So us not knowing that very early, we're immature, you know, we're just doing it because we like it and it's fun and we can go to a battle, you know, and win a jam, whatever. As we grow older and we start to dig into movement, we start to find out that movement is connected to people. Those people have families. Those families live in neighborhoods. They celebrate things spiritually. They have political movements. There is a source of finances being pushed through their neighborhoods. There's a lot of working parts that have nothing to do with dance. When we think about what America was built on, slave labor, it was always about how do we strip a culture away from the people, you know, let's take their identity away, but we're going to use some of those elements to support what it is that we're trying to gain. We have hundreds of years of this in the States. And it's so popular now that it's become the norm, you know? It's like, it's so normal for everyone. It's among popular culture, pop music. You see it in the way people talk, the way people dress, you know, how they walk. There's, you know, the movement, the music. Like, there's so many things that are just taken that. So like, as soon as someone who comes from a neighborhood like me goes, oh, wait a minute, that's from us. This is what we do. It's almost like they get offended that you even said anything because it's so normalized. Like, so how do we hit, you know, the nail on the head? Like, how do we cut the snake head off here? Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about people who consistently get their identity stripped so much where the things that they should be keeping as traditions, they almost are like, fuck it. Like, I don't care, you know, we'll just make some new stuff. i.e. it goes from, if we're talking popping, right, it goes from boogalooing to strutting to popping to boogie to, all right, now if we fast forward, the kids are like, well, shit, let's start doing flexing, let's turf, let's gangster walk, because the music changes. We created a new music, we're gonna create another new dance. They're not gonna steal this one, but let's look now. Everyone's trying to gangster walk. Everyone's trying to turf and flex and all of these things. And they go into those communities, they pull out what they can, they go back home, but they don't bring these people to honor, and respect it. It's consistently them, okay, well now I can teach it and I can share it with the world. And look, I'm the one who brought this thing. Look at me. Wait a minute. You should be shining the light back on those communities, because those people have the story that's authentic. Popular culture, I don't think we'll ever be able to change that. It's already such a big cash cow, money maker, that we'd have to go to the top of these large corporations, and bang down their door. And that's a lifetime, generations of work that's continually happening today. But for us, as it pertains to dance, here's another thought that I sometimes have, and we talk about a lot, is like dance culture. Is there really such a thing? Like, if all we're doing is taking a movement, we just have the aesthetic, and then we built a whole arena of competitions, workshops, performances. Like, this dance came with stories powered by what was happening in neighborhoods: oppression, systematic oppression, drug abuse, broken homes, violence and gangs, police brutality, poor education, really the education to prison pipeline, right? Like, in neighborhoods that I grew up in, we don't have great textbooks. The teachers are like really not skilled. They don't really care about your growth. They just pass you and move you forward, even when you don't know a lot. So when we think about some of our elders in the scene, most of them come from that, almost all of them come from that thing where it's like, they didn't have a lot. The only thing that they had, their only voice, was movement. We took the movement, created a whole dance culture, leave them out of it because they're not professional enough. They're almost too street. They can't hold the conversation the way, when you come here, you got to speak to me like this so I can work with you. And that's totally against what this thing should be, Like, when we say, oh, it's hip hop culture, it's, culture, this loosely thrown out term, Cultures are supposed to have working political systems and spiritual and religious practices and food that we eat and languages. This is all a part of culture, just as much as the art is. You can't just take the art out of the whole culture thing. Hip hop's expression was really New York's expression that stretched out because New York was a hotbed for entertainment and money. United States is huge. United States is huge. Before the Great Migration, Black people moved from the South to the major cities. That means they brought culture with them. They brought shit with them, only for it to be stripped out. It was being stripped out in the South through slavery, slave labor. It's being stripped out in large cities. They went and during the World War I and World War II, where, people are working in these larger factories. Now people are able to hold their own. And here it is, like, once the war is over, like, these people don't have those jobs anymore. So what do they have, This is where all those funk bands come from. This is how they were able to push out all this great music in the 60s, 50s and up, Like, because there was money that was flourishing in the neighborhoods. Once that money left, then people succumbed to these other things that were thrown into the neighborhood, the drugs, the alcoholism, the street life shit. And this dance is a byproduct of that. If we leave that out, we leave out the whole thing. We're missing the why. Why is it that these people do a thing that they do? So let us have that talk, let's talk about that. Like, fuck, we got all these great events. Here it is, I'm judging just to boo. Like, when a part of me, and I'll be straight about it, like a part of me feels like Pop-Tart should have been there. Part of me feels like that should be Sensei Bop. That should be Scorpio. That should be, Kearney and Chuck judging popping, Like, that's how I kind of feel about it. Like, damn. So shit, I'm Black. Am I culturally appropriating my own people? Like, is that what people would consider the Uncle Tom? Like, fuck, that sucks. And so what I do and what we do in our company is we try to stay connected and rooted, and we make sure that we give those people jobs and opportunities to voice who they want, who they are, without coding them, without telling them, I need you to speak more clear and like this. No. We're going to take it as they give it. We'll guide them in ways that we think is helpful, but not in a way where it takes away their self-expression and how they saw a thing, But we have to revisit those communities and bring those people to your community so that people can see what's what. All this talk about who's real and all this, come on, like it's so minuscule to this large picture, So
yeah, one thing about like that made me think about was just this idea that that thing that people say, like, oh, this guy's so unprofessional, or that workshop was very disorganized, or, it wasn't taught in the way that I'm used to it, reminds me of the way I was when I first started hanging around Black folks. Like, I just didn't, there's things that are just culturally different. And you don't need a word that's like, you don't need a label for it to demean it. Like, oh, that's unprofessional. It's like, no, some of the best classes I've had have been from Pop-Tart, and he hasn't stood in the front of the class and made us stand behind. He's just talked to us outside the building for like 30 minutes about what happened in the neighborhood over here, and that was like an amazing workshop. That was a lesson. But the way he did it, yeah, he's cursing, yeah, he's like talking to folks on the street, and he's totally him. And I think we have to understand that you have to be okay with like accepting people for who they are and letting them tell their story in the way they want to tell it. But a part of me feels like that has to do, again, with people not being around different cultures that much. Even when we first met, we butted heads in the beginning, and there was just things that I just didn't understand. I had to learn about you as a person and learn about Junius. And even when me and Rico started our exchange with Jukin and Poppin, there was just cultural shocks. And I feel like people don't try to move past those. They use words like, oh, it's unprofessional, or it's too crazy. This person's crazy.
Is it safe? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a safe space. That safe space word is dangerous, because you could just be actually saying, oh, it's not safe for me and I'm just comfortable in my little bubble. You could actually be saying that, and I'm not open to these different types of people and these different types of cultures. That could be there's a thin line when you say that safe space thing, and I think what I've learned through being around you, Junius, and Rico, probably most specifically, is just to be open, and just to don't shut things down so quick, to not be around it. Because the truth is, like, most of the people that are learning these dances now aren't from those neighborhoods where they came from. So they don't really understand those types of people. So when you go there, you have to be respectful, because one, you're learning their tradition, And two, you're a guest. That's why I call this, one of the things it says like being a guest within a culture. What does that mean? Well, that means you're not from the Fillmore district and you're learning Fillmore. Like that means you're a guest within a culture. So that even breaks race. That could be any race really if you're not from the Fillmore. But how do you respect those people? How are you in service to those people? And that's the big question. You can say like, yeah, I understand the history and I understand the culture, but are you in service to the people that made it possible for you to do what you're doing? Yeah. That's the big question for me.
Yeah, I think someone had
some questions.
Yeah, where was it?
This one.
Yeah.
So he said, Mighty Volt says, through the exploitation, people will get connected to our scene through a commercial way. Do you think there is a way to educate people beforehand instead of hoping for people to grow an interest?
I think there's a lot of educators in the world. Those educators, I feel like, I don't know if we can meet them at right at the start of them learning a thing. We all make a lot of mistakes very early, and that's okay. But once you start understanding that you have a responsibility through education to be accountable for your word and make sure that the things that you're saying are still connected, and as authentic as possible, there's a respectful way to do that. Like, hey, I don't know everything. What I don't know, I can point you in the right direction, or I can go find out, or I can work with you so we can go find out together. These are, I think, some really healthy ways to keep the dialogue open, so it doesn't look like, as an educator, that it all ends with you, and that you look like you're still learning, even though you're sharing the information that you have. So I think it's really difficult to target right before it hits commercial. It's so far gone that I think doing the conversations that we're having here today at least reaches a few. And each of us are from different communities, so we can extend whatever we gain from here to our communities. And that's a start. And this isn't just happening in dance. If we break out of the dance bubble and we look at what's happening in the world as a whole to people of color, it's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
Colonization, it's happening everywhere. So we just need to, I think, re-educate and add to what we know already so we can be better. Some of this stuff, some of us might not even be around to live for the change.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest leaders are not around to live for the changes that did happen. There was a lot of great changes. We have to become new leaders. We have to recreate and create new leaders, as we're doing that for ourselves and for other people. But with that, I think we can't expect overnight, all right, we talked about it, the work is a lifetime's mission, So I don't know if that answers you directly. I kind of took it in a couple different places for us to think about, but.
Yeah, I'll add a few things for that one too. I'll just tell a little bit of the story of what we do in urban artistry. I feel like it's a good example of how to represent something authentically without exploiting it, and being a counterculture to the exploitation. So we can't stop that some people are going to exploitate culture and put it out there to the masses. And that's what's been happening with Black art for a long time. Think about in America, that's stemming from slave days and from minstrel shows. So that thing is perpetuating. And that's what Rashaad was talking about, where Black folks keep changing their dances and their art. And it's the next thing because it just keeps getting taken and used in a certain way, and then Black kids growing up don't even see that thing that was from their parents as something relatable because it's so different now. So we can't stop that. What we can do is start small in groups of people that care about tradition and culture, and you can build in your own communities. You can start having these types of conversations with folks that care about these things in your communities. Urban artistry was built, and this is a large group, but it's all built from something so small, having these types of conversations and saying, oh, we all stand for this. We all believe in this. Let's get together. Let's talk about this. Let's throw events based around this. Let's do education based around this. And now that education and these ideas, we're trying to put a little bit more out with this live series and all that. And that's the whole point, is to put it out there so that there can be a counterculture to the exploitation, because that thing I don't think it'll ever completely stop. But what we can do is be the opposition to that thing and give people another option, so they can say, once they see whoever that's famous doing a certain style, they at least have something that they can find that's right next to it that's like, oh, well, this is actually more the cultural representation of that thing. And if we don't have numbers with that, if we're like just small and then everybody's exploiting the thing, then it will it'll die. The tradition will die. So that's why we call ourselves tradition bearers and cultural ambassadors for these styles, is because we try our best to live that out, to be a counterculture within what is supposed to be a counterculture. Because hip hop is supposed to be a counterculture, but it's not so counter anymore. It's just fashionable. So I think we got some more questions coming in. We got stuff over here too. But did you see the one Will said?
Yeah. Do you feel there's a way to make OGs more palatable? It's an SAT word, dog. More palatable without downplaying their stories and experiences. I hope that came across correctly. You know what we have that they don't is we have a way in, because a lot of us are teaching in dance schools, so we know how to write curriculums and present, movement and stories to people and pass it on. It's working around the globe. What they did, I think, works for them in a very different scenario. It's more oral tradition. It's more based on what you see is what you pick up as well, and built on rep. Like, if you weren't good enough, I'm kind of not going to show you in some ways anyway. Like, you had to, so they were really choosy about it. But it was such a neighborhood dance, and these things were so isolated at one point that it was like everyone did it anyway. To directly answer you, I think there is a way. I think that in every exchange, if we all stop and listen to each other more, we'll be able to learn something from the other person. When we had our conflict, we had to not be stubborn about it and just stick to our view. We had to listen so that we could bridge the gap through two completely different cultures. As far as age and generation, it's the same. Like, what we hear, and I know, Will, you can contest to this, is like, well, what you know about that? That's that old school shit. Y'all ain't grow up on that. That's our music. And they already kind of push you away from even wanting to learn their thing. So the kids are like, well, fuck it. We're going to do what we want to do, even if they are still subliminally pulling the old stuff forward. They're still like, well, our parents don't think that we know anything about their music. But what we have to do is find a way to be in elders and people younger alike, find a way to bridge that gap. Stop and listen to each other. Like, when you around an old school cat, and I know a lot of them like to talk, but they have so many great things to share. Let's stop and listen. But at the same time, they have to do the same for you. They can learn just as much from us and how we explore movement in classroom settings and at jams, as much as we can learn from them and how they explored and taught each other in their schools of thought. So yeah, I think there is a way. I just think that it has to go in both directions. You know, they can't be so stuck on tradition that they don't go forward. You know, we can't be so stuck on innovating that we don't go back.
Mm.
We have to be pulling information from the past forward, like in order to help even with cultural appropriation and bringing these things back to neighborhoods. We got to give those people a chance to document their stories themselves, or help them document their stories. That way it's preserved and moves forward alongside popular culture, alongside it. So it's here. What happens is it's popular culture and they just leave all the other shit in the trail. You know, as teachers, we go into a thing and we learn it and we leave the shit behind. This is the thing that we're talking about. You know, we have to push it forward so that they can be on this ride with us, you know? So I think it's possible. I think coming into it respectfully, coming into it open, coming into it with your ears open and your mouth closed and not ready to receive something that's tangible for you to take away. We're ready to receive something for mental and spiritual connection and heart work, you know? Doing things for someone because you love the idea of, you know, people doing better for themselves. You love the idea that they can imagine if somebody, you know, because some of us on this thing are getting to a place where, like, you know, I'm gonna be 35 soon. Like I'm getting older. So like the young guys are gonna look at me and write me off. You know what I mean? Like I have to go in and connect with these people so that they know that they come from something and I'm a part of that too. So there's some more questions.
RoboZ asks, do you consider popping, strutting, botting, etc. a U.S. American folk dance? Absolutely. I consider it an African American traditional dance. The folk festivals here in the States include mostly blues and jazz when it comes to African American traditions, but we do have some people say, and I can agree from what I've seen so far, is that folk sometimes can mean white. And that is not the case. Folk traditions are just traditions from before us, right? So an American folk tradition of popping a boogaloo, absolutely. Boogalooing, the earliest date that we've researched is 1964 from the stories we've heard. 1964 is a long time ago. That's an old dance. That is very much a folk dance. So one of the things we're doing in urban artistry now is we're bringing urban dance into the folk dance festivals here. That's through Junius, our mentor. He's doing a lot of that work to connect those dots. We're all about connecting the dots from boogaloo to jazz to blues to buck dance. The farther you go back to slave time dances like ring shouts, all of these are African American traditions and they're all folk dance. So the same way your RoboZ Germany might have German folk dances, traditional dances, there's literally no difference. There's costuming for that. Every city does it a little bit different. Same thing with popping, boogaloo, strutting, pop locking, bopping, etc. There's certain music and there's certain movement. It's a full package. So yes, absolutely, it is definitely folk dance. Sam from Holland, I'm curious about the conflict that you had with each other and in what way it had to do with the topics of this live chat. For me, like I said, I went to high school with all white folks and I just didn't hang around black folks really. I mean, the first experience I had around like Puerto Rican, Latin, black, and even more Asian was when I first started going into DC to learn breaking, you know, which was like in my like freshman year of high school, like when I was like 17. But I think for me, it was just like a personality thing, just getting used to a personality that I wasn't quite familiar with. Even the things Rashaad would laugh about, the way he joked, I didn't get it. I didn't get the way that him and House joked, because we didn't joke like that. Movies that we didn't, there was things we just didn't click with. What we did click with was G-funk music and poppin', and that was where it started, But yeah, I think it's just all these little cultural things that we didn't fully understand, and yeah. The other side of it is I had to kind of humble myself a little bit because I was pretty cocky. I was cocky. I was a college kid. I was so cocky. And Rashaad didn't play that. He wasn't having that. So he would get real quiet around me. And then I just realized I can't act like a dickhead around him. So that's my take on that. But yeah, there's more questions rolling in, so we're going to keep it moving.
Yeah, RoboZ, I'd love to hear what you have to say about Greek dances. I know, I mean, we're human, right? Like, there's only so many ways that our bodies can move. And you're always going to find parallels with other cultures. But how it's packaged and how the movement is arranged is what makes it very traditional to the neighborhood. Not to say that the steps of being robotic doesn't come from, like, other people didn't use mechanical movement or how to whip their arms with, like, texture changes per place. But the idea and how it's a package here is very much folk to us. You said, or Chris said, you said that Black people from the South went to cities and took the culture and created the dances. So does that mean it all originated from the South? No, it just means that people come with history and different types of movement, like the word boogaloo. The word boogaloo is actually from the Southern states. It when you go a bit further past 1964, you find that there's history of blues musicians being named boogaloo because of the type of music that they were playing, which was a very free form way of playing, or piano style they called boogie woogie, So this boogaloo term is a thing. That energy from the boogaloo term is pushed forward. People brought soft shoe and flat footing and buck dance way up north, and then the shoes and stuff started to exist with the taps. And maybe there's further information about that. That's another thing. But the idea is slaves were brought in through the Southern states and exchanged culture per tribe, what they could share with each other during times where, because you weren't allowed to speak your language, you weren't allowed to practice your religions, you weren't allowed to dance and praise as you praised in movement. There was a lot of things that were taken from you. There was on one day, on Sundays typically, where they would allow, in some places, where they would allow slaves to congregate and play their drum and play their music the way that they do. But fast forwarding, no, not. They brought culture, but because of a cross population and exchange of cultures, people were able to create different types of movement based on the music of the time. So I think that answers you directly. Oh, well, let's go to the YouTube has questions too here. Okay. We're on YouTube and Facebook.
We're on both.
So.
Okay.
Someone said, this is not really dealing with cultural appropriation. You're talking about dance scene politics. Magneto, I think your name is. So we can answer that offline.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Same with Los Zombies crew. Your question is,
okay. Well,
that's a good one.
Yeah, let's answer.
Well, let's. So, Los Zombies crew. I'm not sure who that is from the crew, but what's up? It says, I don't know how to exactly ask this, but I've always questioned from what I see on why is Poppin' Pete out here teaching globally, not downing Pete, but someone like Harry Berry or Pop Tart isn't out there. The second part of the question was, does that follow with how people can accept street culture and think they aren't safe or is it just something they choose to do and stay within their home? The electronic boogaloo lockers or the electric boogaloos got way more popular than the gentleman that you mentioned, shifting from Fresno down to Long Beach, going on Soul Train, being a part of a lot of music videos. They got a lot of exposure and documentation very early. And we're able to build on that, travel around the world, and that's the product that we see mostly today. If it's not that stuff that you see, then you see hip hop's push with electric boogie and breaking. Popping was received to the world in usually those two ways, and through a few movies and or music videos or seeing a certain artist dance. So that kind of explains it. If a Harry Berry or a Larry McDonald or a Chuck or the Messenger, the Robotroids, or any of these groups would have been in positions where they were on Soul Train too, maybe things would be a bit different, but it still goes back to that thing. Like, how do we, once we, get to that place, bring it back to our communities and make sure that, the world knows that they exist too. What the Electric Boogaloos did, I think, is great. I think, the way that they were able to package their ideology and share their traditions to the world is awesome. A lot of us wouldn't be dancing if it wasn't for that. We wouldn't be able to learn how to teach strut in the way that we teach in some ways like we do, or, we built a lot of shit around the systems that they set out, and we're trying to fit into that world, but we can create our own existence too, They kind of prove that there is a way for us to do it. Yeah.
Let's throw a few more names out there of people. He mentioned Harry Bear and Pop-Tart. So people that are interested in supporting some of these different boogaloos and strutters, and people you might not know about that aren't out there. We got a lot of different people from different places on here, and this is reaching everybody. So I think I'm just going to throw out some names of people you can look up and look into. So he mentioned Harry Berry and Pop-Tart. There's A1, there's Ben James, there's Troy Reagan, there's the Black Messengers, Chuck, there's Kearney Mayers, the Black Resurgence, there's Larry Robertson, there's William Randolph III. Who else we got out there? There's Money B, Playboys,
Reg, Aiko, Jam Patrol.
Right, from San Jose.
There's a lot.
There's so many guys. And let's go to LA. The LA Boppers, Earthquake. Earthquake hasn't been. Sensei Bop, Scorpio. Mm-hmm. There's more dudes in the LA Boppers. I don't know all their names. There's Bop and Chris. There's another dude that, I don't know what that dude's name does. He does the thing with his finger. There's a lot of people. Go look at the footage of the Poppers Picnic and the Boogaloo Barbecue and look at all these guys. Heckle from Heckle and Jekyll, Jekyll's twin brother. Heckle's out there. There's so many dope dudes. Daryl Stokes, No Bone Tyrone. I mean, it's just endless how many people we could be in service to, supporting, and that they'll get so much out of that. And you will get so much out of that too. It's an exchange. It's about exchanging.
I think Decimus had a question.
Okay, Decimus got something. Let's go. Oh man, we're getting more questions. Oh shit. All right. Decimus says, can we talk about the line between guests within the culture appropriating the look of the urban lifestyle and guests within the culture that genuinely find themselves in the lifestyle?
I'm not sure I completely understand that question, Des. Can you go? I think you wrote something else too. Go the other way.
Love that.
Yeah.
Hip hop now being fashionable.
Okay.
I'm talking about people that are just doing it for fashion versus people that are doing it culturally, I think. What's the line between the two? I mean, I think the line is it is a little bit different depending on the community. For instance, when I went to Memphis, there was different things that Rico and that community asked of me, that they wanted from me. They they wanted me to do certain things where they wanted me to teach. Rico wanted me to teach quite quick because I understood the basics. He knew I had reach, so one of his goals was to get the style out there, to spread it in an authentic way. He felt I could do that. But I was having that conversation with him. I went to Memphis to learn from him. I exchanged with him in terms of teaching him something as well. And now we are continually working together, and people know that I'm a Memphis Jooker. That's one of the styles that I represent, you know, and I'll tell you about the history of that thing. I'll tell you about every time I've been there, everything we've done together. I'll tell you about how it was with OG Telly here teaching his workshop. Like, the line is just, how connected are you to the community, and how are you in service? What does that community need? How can you help with what they need? It's not about doing it fashionably, is just doing it for you. Doing it culturally is doing it for more than you, yourself and others. And I think that might be a place to start with that conversation.
Noah?
Yeah, Noah. How do we get schools and colleges to have classes like popping, locking, and breaking? Why is there classes for other types of dance, but not so much hip hop? Hopefully that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's, you know, in academia world, like, people want you to have degrees and certifications, and, you know, to teach something that doesn't have degrees and certifications, you know. So it's typically why you see, you know, ballet and modern, contemporary, and these types of things. Because what a lot of dancers do is they'll tend to go to school, they'll work a system, right? They'll go to school, they'll learn all those other things, build some sort of resume in this, put on their resume, well, I do hip hop too, and then they start teaching that in the school. But I think if we can put packages together, you know, of our curriculum, resources of where we get it, if we can show our extensive training, the people like our mentors, our teachers, and all the places and institutions which are different. Our institutions are very different. We learn in garages and backyards. We learn at events. We learn through conversations on phones. But that stuff counts. There's just a way to write it, you know, where that people can know that this is the length of time and this is my experience in the thing. And then you can share that with the college or whichever type of institution you're trying to teach at. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of packaging who you are on paper, because you can't just go, well, I do this, and then, hey, can you let me, this, it's not gonna work that way. So that's usually how they operate. And then they want you to have some sort of certification, which is why a lot of people aren't teaching in those venues. It kind of keeps us, you know. But the truth is that we have to create our own institutions.
Yeah.
We don't need them to do what we do. That's what our mentor tells us all the time. I don't need your approval to create and or pass on the movement that I've been doing for years. You know, I can create, we created our own school. You know, we never thought that we would be doing anything like this, but this is what we have. And it works. You know, we try to stay as authentic as possible. We try to stay away from the cookie cutter McDonald's program of fast food movement, you know, and you know, it helps in some way, but it's a struggle on the other end, you know. But I hope that answers your question.
So we only have a minute. We have about a minute before the live ends on Instagram. So
okay, well, I guess we can close out.
Yeah, we're gonna close out. We have some more questions here. We're gonna Jeff.
Oh my God.
Days. So thank you guys for these questions. I'm gonna take note to these, and we're gonna bring these up in part 2. So since we only have like 50 seconds, but this is about an hour. We'll do about an hour each time. And we'll get as much in as we can. Thank you guys for joining. These are good questions, really awesome stuff. I'm excited to talk about some of these. I'm looking through them right now. So I think we're going to try to do this on Sundays. It might not be every Sunday. It might be every other, but Sundays will be our day for the Funk and Focus Urban Dance and Dialogue series.
Jojo!
So if you guys want, send me messages with more questions. Feel free to inbox me with more questions for next one. And yeah, share the YouTube link. I'm going to put it on Facebook today. So thank you guys. And we're out. Assassins, Urban Artistry, Funk and Focus.